That's the theme from Aladdin, because I see your magic carpet flying around trying to get me.
You don't have a language. You have no culture. I don't know who your father was.
What's your culture? What's your culture except fleeing? What is your culture, sir? I am the culture and foundation.
African Americans produce people.
What is your culture, sir, besides fleeing? Go ahead. What is your culture? I have a language. Tutnese is my official language. My homeland, America, that I live with my family, that's my home. Where is your language and your homeland, and why did you flee? And what's your culture? What's your culture, sir?
The downgrade from Malcolm X to Tariq Nasheed.
What is your culture? We are the culture, the food, the language, the style, the music, the flavor. All of it is foundational Black American, sir. We are the culture. What is your culture?
Play Aladdin for me. Play Aladdin for me.
What is your culture?
Put it back on for me. Entertain me.
Culture? Oh, Lord, that doesn't bother me, sir. I don't get bothered by you yelling. Darker than me, so we're two N-words in a tree, ain't we?
What's up, and welcome to Delightful D News and Views. I'm your host, DJ. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I'm bringing you a special educational report on an ideology that you may have never heard of, Somali Supremacy. Watch until the end, because I'm going to explain what this is and why it's contributing to a growing divide between Somalians and African Americans. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and put a like on this video and make sure you subscribe. The word is called Somali nemo, and it is loosely translated in English as the essence of being Somali. So here's an article where a Somali author really helps us to understand what this ideology is about. In Anti-Blackness in Somali Nemo, the author says, Somali Nemo has been a way to reclaim our oneness and unity, especially after the Civil War. This concept is usually heartwarming, but it can also be unhealthy and dangerous. Somali Nemo can often lead to othering those who are different from us. Othering can lead to a dangerous trend of disregard for outsiders and their well-being. And so that's the really first telltale sign of this ideology, which is that Somalis themselves do not identify as Black. The author himself says that Somalis often identify as simply Somali. They do not see themselves as part of a larger group of African or Black people, and they often don't see themselves as part of the Black existence. Sometimes Somalis will identify as Arabs, but most typically they prefer to be known only as Somali. And so when African Americans are coming into contact with Somalis, whether it be online, whether it be in real life, it's important to understand that they do not see themselves as part of the collective of Black people. They may see themselves as Arab, they may see themselves as their own tribe of Somali, but they do not see themselves as you. The identifying characteristic of Somali supremacy is the language and the vocabulary that these individuals choose to use, often resorting to using epithets. So I am reading from an article that is called Somali People Were Never Enslaved. And in the article, the author shares a number of terms that Somalians will use to differentiate themselves from those who they consider to be African, and dark African, Black African, sub-Saharan African, and African Americans often get called these names as well. So these terms include Jarir, Bantu, Imjikenda, Adun, Habash, Bide, Sankat Hude, Bun, Medo, and Ugi. Let's be clear that these are not funny names, just in the same way that we do not allow Nigerians to call African Americans Akata. It is no longer acceptable. Well, much in the same way that it is not acceptable for Somalis to use this vocabulary when talking with African Americans. It is offensive. It is racist rhetoric, and it is used to apply a status of being less than to the other person. The third identifier of this ideology is the way that colorism is actively used and encouraged within the Somali community, meaning that Somalis often have a system and a hierarchy among themselves. So it's not only that they have a supremacy ideology, specific individuals, not all Somalis, but the specific individuals that ascribe to this philosophy, they also have a supremacy mindset towards their own. So going back to the anti-blackness article, the author mentions how Somalis who are dark-skinned are not seen as Somali enough, and that mothers who give birth to dark-skinned children are often seen as outcasts or downgraded in the community. If a woman gives birth to a dark-skinned child in the Somali community, she is not looked at as a good woman. She is looked at as having given her child an inferior status. And this is something that brings shame and can even bring harm, because if a woman delivers a child that the husband considers to be not Somali enough, then that's grounds for the man to begin to look for another wife, a second wife, and so on and so forth, so that he can have a child who better suits his features, his looks, and his tastes. So let's be clear, this idea of Somali supremacy is not only acted on the outside world, such as African Americans and other groups, but it's also enacted within the Somali community itself, and often relegates Somalis who don't fit the features or the color scale to a lower status. There you have it, the three main characteristics of Somali supremacy. Now, the reason why I thought this was important to really bring to the surface is because so many people mistakenly think that when you see these folks battling back and forth online, that this all comes down to trolling. And I want to be clear that this is not trolling. There are some individuals who are ready to put everything on the line for their ideologies and their beliefs. You may work with an individual who thinks like this. You may leave your children at a daycare with an individual who thinks like this. You may go to a restaurant and be served by someone who thinks like this. It is so important to have situational awareness to understand that everyone may not be operating from the same mindset as you. African Americans as a people, we tend to be very playful and take everything as a joke. But I want you to understand that the individuals who believe this ideology, and again, it's not all Somalis, but the ones who do, it is important to understand that this is not a game to them. Well, that's all I have to say about that. What do you think of this ideology? Is it something to be concerned about? Let me know in the comments below.